Welcome to another video brought to you by FloatingCottonCandy.com. In today's session, we're going to talk to you about your different options for creating floating cotton candy cones. Now, with traditional cotton candy machines, you're making the cotton candy serving inside of the bowl, so the traditional and probably almost exclusive way of making these cones is to use paper, typically 12-inch paper cones, and this is what most people are used to. However, with the floating cotton candy, since you're actually making your serving above the machine, we have to spool that floss in midair, and you have several different options, but the traditional paper cone is the least effective one. These have the advantage of being universally accessible. You can buy them any place that sells cotton candy supplies, and they are very economical. They're typically as low as 2 cents a piece. However, the fact that they're very short by comparison makes it very hard to make big servings and keep your hand out of the floating floss. And as I go through each of the options typically available, I'll talk about them first, and then I'll stop, and then I'll actually make a cone on each option that I described so you can see what I'm talking about. But looking just at the size of this, you imagine that I'm going to try and spin a serving. You see I have very little working area here to actually get the floss on without getting it floating onto my hands. Additionally, if you try to make a large cone, you're going to find that it's going to sort of flop over. And then lastly, while the shape is really sort of great for spooling or rolling up cotton floss out of the pan, the conical shape isn't great for spinning. It doesn't have a lot of structural integrity, and it's almost impossible. I'm sure you could do it, but it's almost impossible to spin it with one hand very effectively. So you almost have to commit two hands to this process, and even then it's a little difficult to work with. The other problem you're going to find with these is that they're often packed together rather tightly, and one of the things with the Robo Jet Floss machine is the stream is continuous. So if you've watched other videos, you know that to make your next serving, you don't really stop the machine and you don't wait for the bowl to fill. You just sort of float another rod or cone or stick or whatever you're using underneath the floss and start your next serving. So that means you have to get these out really quick, and when they're sticking together, and even if they're not sticking together, it's kind of difficult to do in the real world. And I've done it a couple times. Not easy. Even if you pre-separate them and put them back together, they pack, particularly if it's humid, they'll pack themselves together and make it very difficult. So this means you either need someone to hand them to you, which means a second laborer for no real good purpose other than handing you cones, or you need to separate them ahead of time, set them on your workspace area. Here's one that's really stuck. I find if you twist and turn, you can get them apart. And if you put them on your work area, then you have the problem that you could easily knock them off, or even a wind if you're outdoors, or even a gentle breeze indoors. Somebody opens the door and lets a breeze through, ceiling fan, AC, you find them blowing off your workspace. So while I'm not trying to knock these, they're great for traditional machines. They've got a lot of disadvantages for the RoboJet Floss, and for that purpose, I'd say about the only time they really make any sense is really young kids' parties where you're not trying to make big servings, or as a spare if you run out. I think in the 3 years I've been working with this machine, I think I've used them twice. Once on purpose for a kindergartner party where they didn't want big servings and it was acceptable to use them, and the second time when I accidentally ran out of my typical sticks, and I just happened to have some of these in the truck, and they worked as a backup, but they didn't work very well. The next option is you can use plastic straws. These are available from Robo Labs. You get them in a variety of colors. They ship them randomly. You can't choose your color. They're around 20 inches long. They're very smooth in surface. They're economical. They're about 5 cents a piece plus shipping. They have the advantage of being cost effective. They're actually pretty strong, so you can make pretty good serving sizes on them. They spin well. With a little practice, you can spin them pretty quick with one hand. Most people are going to start out with two, but you can do them one-handed, and that means you can also do one in each hand and then trade off side to side and put on a pretty good show. Kids really like the colors. They dress the event up. Being long, and by long I mean 20 inches, pretty good size, it means that you can make a really good size serving and leave a good 5-6 inches for your hand to operate, keeping your hand out of their food product, and also leaving a nice handle for the customer so they can eat the product without getting a mess all over themselves as well. So you've got cost effectiveness, it's colorful, they're lightweight, which makes them really useful when you've got to carry 1,000 of them in a tub. Doesn't weigh much. They do take more space than 1,000 paper straws and some of the other options, but you know, seldom are you going to serve 1,000 in a day, so that's not really much of a problem. The one disadvantage to the plastic straws, I should say second disadvantage. The first is they are a little bulkier than some other options, but the only real disadvantage is being perfectly smooth. In some environments, it's hard to get the very first layer of sugar to stick to them. So I've talked about in blogs and articles, and I think in some other videos, you have the option that you can either get like a rag with a little bit of honey or syrup or something of that nature and just give it a quick wipe, and that'll make it sticky. Or you can soak them in water, pull it out, give it a little bit of shake because you don't want it dripping wet. That will create a soup on your stick. Instead, you want just a few little droplets of water to make that first bit of floss stick. And those two options will work out real well for you to get it to stick. If it's particularly humid, sometimes they won't grab real well. The floss will be too wet. But like I say, just a little bit of dampness, these will generally work. Not in every environment, but in most. A third option is mini sticks, also or mini straws, also available from RoboJet Floss, also available in multiple colors. These are shorter, little smaller diameter. Smaller diameter I actually like because you can spin them faster. One rotation in my fingers will move a lot quicker. You can't make the larger servings, but again, great for younger kids' parties where the parents don't really want them to have monster servings anyway. Also great for things like store openings, weddings, receptions, conventions, trade shows, anything you might be hired for hourly where you're not selling off the stick, or for events where maybe you are selling off the stick and people bring up really young kids and they don't want to buy them a large serving. This gives you that opportunity to create a smaller serving, still easy to work with, also very cost effective, less expensive than the typical straws, and easy to work with. Another option Robo Labs provides, and this I didn't know existed until about 6 months ago, they make a wooden square stick with a slightly rough surface. At first you would wonder what the point to this is, and it actually has no points, which is nice. You can't poke anybody's eye out with it very easily. But the fact that it is slightly rough and that it has essentially sharp edges, and I don't mean sharp as in cut, but I mean very nice defined cuts because it is square, means that it doesn't really need to be damp or wet as the plastic straws do in order to really grab the floss. So the real advantage to this is that it works in almost every circumstance. Those sharp edges will grab the floss. It's just slightly more expensive than the straws. The small straws are essentially $5 per 100, or I should say 5 cents a piece. The larger straws are 7 cents a piece. So both are more expensive than paper, but compared to what you're selling the servings for, it really doesn't amount to much. These are $7.50 per 100, or 7.5 cents a piece. Obviously not much more than the straws, even though they're a wood product. So two big advantages: they don't need to be wet, and if you're in an area where people are uber concerned about using plastic straws, even though you can collect the straws back as recyclables, if they're concerned at all about that, this is a wood product, so obviously it is biodegradable, and it doesn't need to be dampened. The disadvantage as an operator to these is that it's a little more difficult, or I should say it takes a little more experience to learn to spin them. You're almost assuredly going to start out spinning with two hands. Again, there's nothing wrong with spinning with two hands, but if you want to use your other hand for something, whether it's making change or getting another stick or pouring floss or making any other gestures, anything you want to do, you are committed for probably the first few hours anyway to learning to use it with a two-handed method. You eventually will learn to spin it pretty well one-handed, but it's not a natural feeling because it is square. So other than a little bit of awkwardness to begin with, and that goes away, it's almost a really kind of a perfect solution for spinning floss. It's slightly shorter, so if you really want to make big servings, it may not be ideal for that. But again, given the length, it's not that much shorter, really, less than 2 inches. But I do notice I can't make quite as large a serving with these square wooden sticks. But it has got a lot going for it, and at 7.5 cents a piece, it's quite reasonable. The last typical option, And I say typical because I've seen people on the internet myself using things like broomsticks and other assorted goodries to make enormous servings. But the other typical solution is wooden bamboo skewers. These have the advantage that you can get them in pretty much any length. There's links on my website that companies will sell these from 6 inches, which wouldn't be practical, all the way up to 36 inches, which really isn't practical either. But if you want to make some monster servings, a 36-inch skewer would let you do that. These tend to be about 5 millimeters, which again gets you in that small diameter, allows a really fast spin. This is sort of my preferred choice when I'm doing more entertainment than vending. And by entertainment, what I mean is, sometimes you're making servings and you're just trying to serve them as quickly as possible. You're doing vending or you're at a busy event where you need to hand them out as quick as possible. You're not trying to make them particularly big. You're not trying to show off. But if you're trying to do an experience, you're trying to entertain people, you want to work further away from the machine, whether that's doing it high up in the air or moving side to side, doing 2 at a time. The ability to spin quickly usually lets you get further away or further up. Because if you have more floss in the air, you usually need to be able to spin faster to control it and make sure that it doesn't hit the ground in case the rate of wind or anything changes the flow. You want to quickly be able to catch up. So having a stick that you can spin quickly and the small diameter would let you do that. I do prefer these for that kind of environment. When it comes to vending, the other options are actually probably better, but there are some instances where that fast spin, the smooth surface, the small diameter is nice, and that you can get them in any length. I typically get these in 21-inch, which is just slightly longer than the other options, almost exactly the same as the plastic straws, maybe a couple millimeters shorter. So that's my preference. Again, just from my own experience, some people like them. I know 18 is real popular. Some people like the 2-foot, the 24-inch. But since I'm used to working with the plastic straws a lot, the 21-inch just fits me naturally. They do have to be soaked in water. However, that smooth surface, like the plastic straw, will not grab the floss, and it doesn't have the advantage of having sharp edges or defined edges, I guess I should say, like the wood stick. So this becomes a temperamental product. It needs to be wet, but it can't be soaking wet. So you have to learn through experience that there's just the right amount of dampness that will grab the floss, but without turning it into sort of a soup. So if it's over-soaked, it will make that first layer of floss too wet, and you'll find this will spin inside of your floss as soon as you get in size and a certain weight to the floss head that you're making. This will then lose adhesion and it will spin inside. You'll have to strip it off, throw it away, start over. If it's too dry, same thing. First floss might grab a little bit, but it doesn't have enough adhesion that you can make a large serving. So it's kind of a matter of looking for perfection, kind of a Goldilocks paradox. And I can't tell you how to do that. I can just tell you that you'll pick it up pretty quickly after you work with it. But expect a little bit of a learning curve as to know how long to soak them and then how long is too long. And don't worry, it won't ruin anything, but I just learn out of habit that if they've been in there 5 or 10 minutes, what I'll do is I'll pull them off, give them a wipe off, put them under the machine, and I'll usually have like 10 or 15 under the machine that are in the stage of slowly drying so that they're the right amount of moisture content to grab the sugar, but not turn it into soup. And that might sound like a lot to have to mentally process as you're dealing with customers or clients, people coming by asking questions, looking for servings, and yeah, it is a little bit of an extra mental load. So these aren't necessarily the best choice for beginners, but again, because of the small diameter, the ease to spin, and the fact that you can work with them when you're doing 2 at a time and working further away from the machine. I don't want to say they're the professional choice, but they offer some flexibility that you might not quite get with the other options. So I'm not saying there aren't other things other people are using. I may in the future find other options to provide, but running from the most obvious to maybe the least obvious, the things that you can use are paper cones, not preferred, small and large straws, great options, probably used by most people. Square sticks, which most people don't realize exist, and then the bamboo skewers. And again, biggest advantage is the small size, easy to rotate, and you can get them in any length you want. And now I'll take a break, start the machine running, and I'll make a couple servings, well, one serving on each, and let you see how the pros and the minuses actually work out when you're working with them above floss that is shooting up into the air. All right, so we're back to use each of the products for making an actual floating cone. Sugar's about warmed up, and we're going to start with the paper. Again, that's what most people are used to. But you'll see as the floss comes up, it's pretty hard, but not impossible, to use a paper cone to make a serving. It takes a lot of practice, and I have to point my hand downward quite a bit in order to keep the floss on the cone, but not on my hand. Almost impossible to spin it well enough, and this is about as big as I can get the serving. If this is what you want to do, this size, we're about done. That's about all I can do. Will work for what we call small servings, probably good for grade school, but that's it. Any more than that, and I'm done. And you'll see it's starting to fall off the cone, but it will work. Small plastic sticks allows me to get more aerial, just like a big plastic stick, but smaller. Only about a nickel a piece. I can do it one-handed or two-handed. I'm not going to make a large serving, but I do have the ability that I can, not so much where I'm standing here in front of a video camera, but I do have the ability to move the cone around, spin it one-handed or two-handed. Two hands gives me better speed and control. One-handed allows me to use my free hand to change and grab other servings. The large straw, again, I've got it soaking in water over here. I give it a little tap to get the excess water off. I want just enough to coat it. Most people start out two-hand. After you've done it for a little while, you can shift to one hand. You'll be able to do fine. I can do quite a large serving if I'm working with 20-inch straw like this. I'll hold it up high so you can see. Usually I try to go 3 or 4 inches past the end of the straw so that I can still leave a really good size handle and make a really good size serving. Clearly the advantage of this length of straw becomes pretty apparent. Allows me not only to make a larger serving, but if I'm doing any type of entertainment aspect to this, you know, if I've got a 20-foot ceiling and enough distance around me, the fact that I can make a larger serving means that I can spend some time. I can't do it on camera because I'm in a fixed location. I don't have a camera person, but I can walk 15, 20 feet away, out into a crowd, onto a dance floor, greet guests, or just entertain people. And I've got enough time to make this serving to allow me to do some things. I can do one in each hand, trade off back and forth. It's very natural to work with. And unlike with a little paper cone, I don't have to point it downwards. I can let the floss go up and I can capture it on the way back down. Very economical, very easy to work with. Now, the square wooden dowel here by comparison, so I say has the advantage that I don't have to get it wet. I don't have to have them soaking anywhere. Now I turned down the heat a little too much on the machine, so I'm going to turn it back up. You can see I'm not making a nice even floss at this point, and this was operator error because I'm on camera, not paying attention to all the details. So I'll put my cone back over as I turn the heat up. Well, hopefully not too high. All right, we got a nice jet stream coming back out. I'm going to say not quite as long as the straw. It's a little bit shorter. I can't spin it quite as fast, but with a little practice, I can get by. And not having to have it soak in water, not having to worry about it being too wet, big advantage. Will take you a while to learn to spin it one-handed. You'll never spin it quite as fast as you will a round diameter straw for obvious reasons, but you can do pretty well with it. Cost effective, easy to work with, convenient. Bamboo skewer. I didn't mention the bamboo skewers are actually the most expensive option. Usually end up spending somewhere around 9 to 10 cents a piece. But again, even though that's twice the price of a plastic straw, we're not talking big money here compared to what these sell for. Now, you probably can't tell watching the video, but this is so much easier to spin. The smaller diameter and the fact that it's really smooth, I can spin it with my thumb and one finger, and it will sort of float in my hand and I'll get more than one revolution per spinning effect. That speed allows me to make a tighter, compact, smoother looking floss if I want to. I don't have to. And as I said, it also means that I can usually get further away from the machine, again, not on this video, but in the real world, because I don't have to worry about having 20 or 30 feet of floss floating in the air. I can always catch up. If I want to control the shape and make bowls or mushrooms or things like that, the fact that I can really control the speed more lets me be precise in how I roll it up on the cone, or the serving, whatever term you prefer. But the cost is a little higher, and I do have to have the right amount of moisture on the stick or the skewer in order to make it work. So those are your options. That's what they look like in use. Again, there may be other things people are using I'm unaware of. But that's all about what you're going to float onto when making RoboJet floating cotton candy. Thanks for watching the video. Be sure to stop by the site, floatingcottoncandy.com. Again, keep tuned for more videos to come into the future.